Okay, welcome everybody. I am Eden. I'm a registered dietitian based in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, and this is Alexa. She is a dietetic intern based in Denver. And tonight we're going to talk about a lot of different aspects of being an athlete, but I don't want to give away too much. Alexa has a nice introduction for herself, so I'm just going to go ahead and turn it over to her.
Yeah, thanks, Eden. First off, thank you everyone for coming. This is my name's Alexa, if you missed that introduction. I'm a dietetic intern. I was a professional runner for 8 years, and this life after sport, being more than an athlete, is a subject that I've sort of stumbled upon just in my personal experiences with retirement. And so I feel like it's a phase of an athlete's life that isn't necessarily always addressed. And especially when you move on from teammates and coaches and support staff. And so this is just a general overall accumulation of research and personal experience and tips and recommendations. So I'm going to start with the story. It's May 2022, so just over a year and a half ago. I was based in the Portland area. I fly to Nashville to compete in a 1,500-meter race in the Music City Classic, which for those of you who are not runners, it's just a regular invitational in the middle of the track season. It's a very low stakes race. Okay. This directly didn't qualify for me for really anything. My season had been going okay so far. It was my 7th season as a professional athlete, and I was a 800, 1,500-meter specialist, middle distance on the track. So this race wasn't anything beyond my capabilities. I was on the starting line with nervousness and excitement and a little anxiety pulsing through my veins, which I'm sure all of you guys have felt in your sports, no matter what, whether it's races or games or competitions. All the racers line up. I get into the starting position, trying to calm my mind, and the gun goes off. I get into a pretty good positioning on the rail behind the pacer, setting myself up to run a pretty good race. A 1,500 is 3 3/4 laps around the track, almost a full mile. And it can be a very strategic race where some runners will push hard from the start, some might wait until 2 laps into the race or halfway, and others will wait until the last lap. Every race plays out very differently. And this race went out at what I would call a pretty solid pace. I mean, quick enough to set ourselves up to run a respectable time and one to qualify for nationals. The whole group was together through the first 400, first lap, maybe 12 or 13 of us. And I'm still second from the front. As if you're not a runner, it can be pretty tiring to run a race from the front for the entire time. So it's pretty strategic to get onto the shoulder of whoever is leading and let them set the pace and let them be chased. We slowed down slightly as we went through 2 laps, but this is when a racer really starts to get excited and get ready to move by putting in a surge, going to the front. Once again, 1,500-meter races are notoriously strategic, and it's a reason why runners love to race the 1,500. It's like a game of chess where you have to respond with a move of your own and match paces, or you'll get beaten. So as a competitor, these races are why we race. The adrenaline to push ourselves, put yourselves in a position to win. And this is where you want to start figuring out if the people around you are going to surge, if they're going to make a move. But it's really important to be focused and in the zone at this point in the race at halfway. And like these races are only 4 minutes. And so there's less than 2 minutes. There's a lot that can happen. But the second that we pass the halfway mark, instead of being present and excited about being in a good position in a race, my thought was, I don't want to be here anymore. And it was fleeting, but it came to the forefront of my mind in a situation where that thought should have been the last thing on my mind. I mean, this is when you were supposed to be really excited, because as athletes and as competitors, we train for races and we train for games. And so to not be excited about competing, which, like I said, all athletes train for, was a call for me to reflect on my career and decided if I should keep running, and ultimately ended up deciding to retire. So I finished the race. I obviously checked out after that thought in my mind. Flew home that afternoon, and after many tears and processing of emotions, I met with my coaches the next day and I told them that I was ready to be done. Now, granted, this is a very simplified version because, as you can imagine, after doing something for 8 years, which was how long I was a professional runner, my little head was just swimming in thoughts, but you sort of get the gist of it. Now, I tell you all this because even though I was ready to be done with my career, I had come to this decision. And I had been thinking about retirement for probably 8 months up to that point. I was excited to take on the next phase of my life. I struggled and sometimes still struggle with the evolution of my athletic identity. And some people don't have the luxury of deciding when their athletic career is done. And so every athlete eventually has to find out who they are outside of the sport, whether they retire from a professional sport or are done with their collegiate eligibility, or just a high schooler deciding that they don't want to compete in college. We all have to understand who we are outside of being athletes. And this influences how we perceive our bodies, how we eat, how we move, our goals, our priorities. It's not just, I'm not a runner anymore, or I don't play softball or soccer or basketball anymore, or whatever your sport was. It's so much more than that. And we'll be covering a decent amount of information throughout the webinar, but all I want is for each of you to be able to take away one concept or a tip or anything that we cover. And if you're able to do that, then I'm happy. Please don't feel like you need to apply everything that we're talking about because it can be a lot. The life after sport transition or process can be difficult on many fronts. From personal experience and collective studies and research, retirement and our athletic identity can be sorted into these 4 buckets. And these are the topics that we'll cover and how these relate to transitioning from a sports-centric lifestyle to a much more holistic approach. And even though I feel I have experience speaking on the matter, I also recognize that I am not an expert and I'm very early on in my career. And so all the information that we'll cover today are perspectives that have helped me personally, and I hope they help you as well. So you may have struggled with more than one of these aspects, or none of these aspects, quite frankly, but all of these facets of our lives will be directly or indirectly related to athletic identity. And while the degree of how strongly you might identify with being an athlete can vary based off of the level you performed at, we all were athletes and we all still are. And I found that even my definition of being an athlete has evolved completely. So being an athlete, more so than any other career or identity, will flow into these aspects of our lives: how we eat, how we move, our mentality, and other strongly held beliefs. I'm just going to give a quick background of who I am. I was, like I said, I was a professional runner for 8 years. I signed a professional contract with Nike the summer before my senior year of high school. So I forgave my college eligibility. This was before NIL deals and being able to compete in college while being sponsored. And so I signed when I was 17, and I went on to have a relatively solid career. I never made an Olympic or world championship team, but my highest place was 5th at the US Nationals. I went on to get a bronze medal at the Pan American Games. And so it was a solid career, I would say. I ultimately retired in 2022 after 8 years because, there's many different reasons why people retire, and there's many different reasons why people can choose to retire also. I ultimately ended up retiring because I felt like my personal growth in the sport was done, and there was more aspects and more chapters of my life that I was more excited for. Ultimately, I decided to pursue nutrition. And granted, I did go to college, I did get a degree, but I got in finance, not my forte. So I made a full 180-degree shift into nutrition. And I pursued nutrition because throughout my career, I had a really difficult relationship between food and confidence and body image. And I knew that weight was such a oppressive thought in the back of my mind while I was competing. And it was always something I was concerned about, even as a 17 and 18-year-old trying to compete professionally. And so I have pursued nutrition to really help foster that relationship between body image and confidence and food and what it means to be an athlete. I am now a student at Manchester University. It is a very small school in Indiana. I am pursuing a Master of Science in Nutrition and Nutrigenomics, and hopefully I'll become a registered dietitian someday and help athletes all over. So, as I have described, many factors and facets can be difficult to navigate during retirement or moving on from your sport. According to research conducted by Harvard Medical School and the Victorian Institute of Sport, the most significant reason for the difficulty in transitioning away from your sport is a continued sense of athletic identity. And we'll explore what this means in each of the topics that we have previewed, but some of the more common struggles of an athlete moving on from their sport is body dissatisfaction and grief. And this is related to the construct of body idealization from an athletic perspective. And while this dissatisfaction and grief does alleviate the longer one has been away from their sport, this dissatisfaction can lead to broader effects on self-esteem, self-worth, physical condition, and focus. The next is disordered eating and compensation. This is most evident in athletes coming from a sport of high energy expenditure, running, swimming, triathletes, gymnastics. And this can be displayed through engaging in compulsive exercise to try and match the energy output of your former exercise levels, or disordered eating behaviors such as binge eating and dietary restrictions. The long-term influence of sporting culture is related to a continued athletic identity, specifically speaking to difficult experience during an athlete's career. This could be career dissatisfaction, career injuries, or surgery, and inadequate social support. Also, heightened levels of objectification from increased body monitoring and awareness during one's athletic career can carry over into retirement. So I wanted to start by introducing some of these common struggles, because if you are aware and acknowledge the research related to athletic identity, you can better adjust your beliefs, mindset, and value as more than an athlete to set yourself up for success in your life after sport. Something that I will keep reiterating throughout this presentation is that really, with all of these facets, it is about awareness and acknowledgement. If you are aware and acknowledge the changes that will come in life after sport, after you've retired or graduated, you're just going to set yourself up for success, and you'll really become a more well-rounded person and not just the athlete that you are. The graph shown here was a study conducted by the International Olympic Committee in coordination with a review of the importance of preparing for life after sport. So while competing, 46% of current athletes experience mental health issues. And while retirement or moving on from your sport can alleviate some of these feelings, or some of these issues, it can also exacerbate some of these feelings. So it is really important to address not only your mental health issues, but all the struggles that can happen after you retire or graduate. The principles that we will cover as they relate to these 4 buckets that I had mentioned will be the framework and how we see our athletic identity and how it can start to shift after we've moved on from our sport. These are personal principles I have adopted and are supported by current research. And they are simple reminders of the concepts that we'll cover today. And in retrospect, many of these concepts seems pretty obvious. Like, of course, my body's going to change. I'm not running 70 miles a week anymore. Or, of course, I need to eat even though I'm not burning 1,000 calories a day, especially to support my new goals. But these principles, they didn't seem obvious to me. My body changing was confusing and frustrating because I had judged my body to look a certain way for so long, and I expected it to look a certain way for so long. And I didn't think I needed to eat because my thought patterns were so focused on fueling for athletic performances rather than all of the other benefits and everything else that food is beyond just fuel. So I bring these up knowing that they might seem obvious, but also realizing the power of acknowledging these changes in our life after sport. So we will start with body awareness and acceptance, being conscious and aware of that your body will change. I mean, this could be numerous different things, but it could be muscle loss, it can be adipose tissue, or it can be both. But also be aware that to some degree, because of the body objectification of sports and athletes, your body changing is intertwined with your identity. I mean, it can be so closely related, or it can be loosely related, but it is intertwined with your identity. And in turn, this can lead to broader effects on self-esteem or self-worth. Your mind might correlate these body changes with lack of discipline or laziness, which in reality, it's not. Like, you're not lazy, you're not lacking discipline, you are simply not exerting as much energy, and your body will change, and it's okay. It's healthy even. And so this isn't to say that you won't still resemble an athlete. You've been training for years and years, most likely. However, your body just may not look like it did when you were exercising an hour, 2 hours a day. But that's okay. So evaluate if any of the emotional attachment you may have with these body composition changes. Also, appreciate everything your body has done. Only 7.5% of athletes that are competing in high school will go on to compete collegiately, and only 2% of athletes that compete collegiately will go on to compete professionally. You've been disciplined, hardworking, and you've probably pushed and grinded, most likely for many, many years. So just give yourself some grace and give your body a thank you. And then as athletes, acknowledge the magnitude of self-criticism that we can have on our bodies. This includes body comparison, not only to others, but also to your former self. And this includes preconceived notions for how our bodies should look, whether this is a number on the scale or muscle definition or even posturing in the mirror. For so long, there may have been a standard or expectation, self-imposed or external, for how your body should look, but just evaluate, why do I have this standard? Why do I have this expectation? Is this beneficial to me? Is this helpful? Is this supporting me in my goals in any way? It probably isn't. I thought that this graph was helpful to conceptualize the complexity of body acceptance and influencing factors. This graph comes from the same study I had mentioned at the beginning of the talk from Harvard Medical School and the Victorian Institute of Sport. And this shows that continued athletic identity is over here is a significant barrier to positive food and body outcomes. Acknowledgement and knowledge about the factors that influence body image and the importance of this evolution of athletic identity are needed for a positive relationship with our bodies after we retire. So body compositions are going to change. If you have positive and you accept this, you will have adaptive behaviors that are productive. But if you don't, it will turn into compensatory exercise, restrictive eating, binge eating, into that cycle, which are just not beneficial to you. So returning to our principles, I want you to challenge how and why you might judge your body. Are you being critical of your weight? Are you overanalyzing how your body looks in the mirror? Are you fixating on how your body has changed since you've stopped competing? I can honestly say yes to all of these at some point. But why? I mean, for so long, I had this image and this weight of what I should look like as an athlete, and I still hold on to that image, even though I'm not competing anymore. So then I ask myself, why am I still holding on to that? Why can't my body change? And I don't have an answer. So then I tell myself, well, maybe I can be kinder. Maybe I can focus on how I feel rather than how I look. Or maybe I can stop limiting myself because of this predetermined look that I have, start giving myself some grace and start kicking some ass. Like, you spend so much mental energy on fixating on how you look, that just think of where that mental energy can go towards. It can go towards your goals and your dreams and helping people. And we are just so much more than our appearance. And so to fixate on how I look undermines my self-worth and everything else I have to offer: my intelligence, my confidence, my creativity, my love. And this is what I remind myself when I do start to spiral about my body images. I also challenge you to prioritize how your body feels over its appearance. And this is a much more, like I said, productive and better use of your mental energy. And I realized that constantly judging my body and worrying how I looked was also so incredibly draining. I could use this mental energy, like I said, to be more positive and productive, or learn, or help others, or be creative and imaginative. And once I realized that, albeit slowly, I redirected my focus towards other aspects of life. And it's okay if you continue to fall back into maybe being hypercritical of yourself. But also ask yourself, what characteristics do you value beyond physical appearance? Next topic, evaluating and adjusting eating habits, is related to body awareness and acceptance. So what once was intentional eating can now be shifted. So the key drivers to a poor relationship with food are going to be continued athletic identity, again, establishing unrealistic expectations related to nutritional and body composition changes, and athletes with significant energy balance changes. Like I said, those athletes that are coming from high energy expenditure sports, and the reason for retirement. It's important to realize that post-retirement eating behaviors will also change. To help foster a healthy relationship with food, there are a few things to consider: giving yourself permission to eat, recognizing internal hunger and satiety cues, and eating to meet physical and nutritional needs. It's important to give yourself permission to eat because many athletes experienced considerable constraints around their food intake while competing, and whether this was self-imposed or externally enforced by coaches. So putting off certain foods and denying cravings or putting limits on the foods that you can and cannot eat is the number one reason for overeating and binging, either later in that day or days to follow. Recognizing internal hunger and satiety cues is important with intuitive eating, which we'll cover next. And then eating to meet physical and nutritional needs also need to be acknowledged, because rather than fueling for performance, you're now fueling for life. And while this might look a little different nutritionally than while you were competing, fueling and eating regularly is just as important for cardiovascular health, for bone health, and for mental health. Shifting to intuitive eating will help in the athletic retirement process. For anyone who isn't familiar, intuitive eating is a framework developed in 1995 that integrates instinct, emotion, and rational thought into their approach to eating and has over 100 supporting studies to date. A study conducted by the National Center for Sport and Exercise Medicine on retired athletes specifically indicated that intuitive eating will help reduce disordered eating and help athletes relearn how to trust their body's hunger and satiety cues once they do leave their sport. Intuitive eating also has been associated with healthier eating choices and weight maintenance. So retired athletes may fall into the dieting and binge cycle due to many of the reasons that I have already cited. Dieting is a trigger for overeating, and the harms of dieting far exceed any perceived benefit. So any diet will set you up for failure. It will erode self-trust, and it will erode confidence. So the more you deny your true hunger and fight your nutrient biology, the stronger and more intense these food cravings and obsessions will become. And I know I keep saying listen to your body's hunger and satiety cues, but by doing this, you respect your body and you respect yourself. And this is dependent on giving yourself permission to eat what your body wants, whatever kind of food that is. Eating comfort food is part of a healthy relationship with food, especially if you do it while staying present and not placing any guilt on yourself. And you cannot make peace with food when you're at war with your body. This goes back to body awareness and acceptance. So like I said, the principle, you cannot make peace with food when you're at war with your body, is a simple reminder to honor your hunger and satiety cues. So eating when you're hungry, stopping when you're full, be kind to your body, and realize that food is more than fuel. And while it might take some time to trust your body's hunger signals and what it needs, your body will tell you when you need certain foods, whether this is protein, vegetables, comfort food. If your body needs something, it will start to crave it. And cravings are just signals that the body needs something, and it's usually just energy. But you can strategically pair what you're craving with another food for sustainable energy, while also honoring those cravings. And I also realize me just saying, listen to your body can sort of be a tall order. I mean, for athletes, relearning and reinterpreting your body's physiological signals can take months or even years, especially if you have had a history of eating disorders. So while this is just a very, very brief introduction to intuitive eating, working with a certified intuitive eating dietitian like Eden can help cultivate and foster healthy relationships with food, mind, and body. As for takeaways to help promote healthful eating in this transition phase, eating every 3 to 4 hours will help reduce overeating later in the day and in days to follow. And these don't need to be elaborate meals, it can be small snacks as well. And also acknowledge that food is more than fuel. Food can bring friends and families together, evoke and build memories, allow space for creativity, an opportunity to try something new, and honor and experience new cultures. And something I like to remind myself when I'm eating is to respect my body. And this means eating enough for my body to support me in all my goals, but also not binging. But if you give yourself permission to eat without guilt, if you eat often enough, this does decrease instances of binging. Next is mindset shifts and being more than an athlete. I will say I was always the athlete who loved logging my training. I love sitting down with lunch after a training session and writing in my journal how the workout went, my splits, my thoughts. I love seeing my progression in workouts and in mileage from week to week or from year to year. And I also loved getting messages from my coaches after my workouts and races on how great I looked or how strong and smooth I was looking or how I ran. And of course, I had internal confidence, but I also probably is too much. So really valued that external validation. But when you move on from a sport, you don't have those external affirmations. You don't have evidence or proof of your progressions or hard work or if you're succeeding or not. Um, I was talking with someone and they had said that athletes will actually often go back to school so that they can still get that external affirmation through grades and getting A's or doing really well in their assignments because they love the evidence and proof of how hard you're working. And it took me a while to realize that I actually needed to reevaluate what success looked like and what hard work looked like and what my goals even were. And not only can this help give you a plan or roadmap after you retire or graduate, but it can also provide a sense and ease of being proactive. And in sports and as athletes, it's actually pretty easy to set goals. I mean, they're all going to be performance related. They're most likely going to be improvement from the year before. But after you retire and you move on from your sport, and you can still have athletic goals, but you'll have to decide if and what your other life goals are going to be. And these can be career goals, they can be relationship goals, but it's important to ask, what are my goals? What are the steps I need to take to achieve my goals? And what does success actually look like for me now? And then there's the other side to mindset shifts, finding what you valued in your sport and other aspects of life. And running, like I had said beforehand, I really valued the personal growth side of the sport. And sports are great in general because they provide us with so many learning opportunities that we can apply in non-sport situations. I mean, we learn resilience, we build confidence, we develop lifelong relationships, and we're able to push ourselves beyond our limits. So a place to start deciding and what your life after sport looks like, whether this is a job or a new hobby or social activity, is asking yourself and reflecting on what you loved about your sport. As I said, I valued the personal growth that came from running, and this can vary from athlete to athlete. This can be the competition side of the sport, the social side of team sports, challenging yourself. There's so many different values from sports. But once you evaluate what your value was from your sport, then you can ask yourself, how is this going to be redirected so I don't lose that part of me? And it can be continued through sports. It can be joining your rec club or fitness classes at your local gym to continue pushing yourself. It can be how you challenge yourself in your career or pushing yourself outside your comfort zone. Or you might realize that you're ready to shift your values that you had within your sport. This could be spending more time with family or volunteering or giving back. So all in all, these 2 points, evaluating your goals and hard work and redirecting the values that you had in your sport, are just about taking a step back and being cognizant of the traits that make you you and how those can be altered and applied beyond athletics. Because at the end of the day, these are all about you, not just you as an athlete. So sit down with a coffee or a drink and think and dream about what your goals are now. Once you identify your goals, you can start writing out steps in achieving them, and then you can evaluate what it actually means to work hard. And you might not have the external validation that you had in your sport. So this is going to challenge you to find out who you are outside of being an athlete and who you want to be, which is exciting. And then identify the value of your sport to you and brainstorm avenues that can continue to fulfill these values. To go from not being on a team or to go from being on a team to not seeing your friends at practice every day can be a big change for someone who really valued the social aspect of their sport. To go from working towards an athletic goal to not having any tangible performance goals can leave you feeling a bit lost. And to bring it back to body awareness and acceptance, identifying your values also helps improve body image because of the emphasis of what you offer beyond your appearance. So once again, being aware of these shifts will help set you up for success. Okay, last section is how to move and exercise expectations. When I first retired, I went back and forth on my approach and mindset to movement. For the first maybe 2 to 3 months, I was still training how I was training before I retired. I was running 65 to 70 miles a week. I was doing lifts 2 to 3 times a week. But the difference is that I wasn't doing any of the recovery modalities that I had done for the previous 10 years or so to prevent myself from getting injured. I was in a I can do whatever I want headspace. I didn't prioritize sleep or stretching or any of the countless mobility routines I would do to keep my body healthy. And as you can see from this MRI report, I ultimately ended up tearing both of my meniscus, which is evidently not a sustainable movement routine. So then I swung to the complete opposite side and approach to movement. I didn't see a reason to exercise. I wasn't trying to get in shape. I wasn't trying to compete. And I didn't have any athletic goals for really the first time in my life. So there was a time I didn't exercise. But what I realized in this pendulum of approaches is that I need to move regardless of having athletic goals or not. Movement personally helps me be more productive, have more patience, and be a better person because I realized I didn't like my attitude when I didn't move or didn't exercise. And as athletes, we're usually so focused on our athletic goals, and I'll touch on this a little bit more, but movement and exercise also has a ton of other benefits besides just the mental and cognitive and performance side of it. I mean, movement and exercise protect the body from health damaging effects of stress. They increases metabolism, reduces the risk of chronic disease, and improves mood, learning, and memory, in addition to all the other physiological benefits that come with movement. So when you're shifting physically in your movement and exercise routine, it's just as significant to address the mental shift. As athletes, your sport was probably focused on goals or winning or competition or the grind or being as mentally strong as you can. While what you do now can still encompass that, it will more likely be focused on movement and feeling good. And this doesn't need to be a complete 180-degree shift, but address and acknowledge the reasons for movement now will be important. And while addressing new exercise routines may seem unnecessary, it is necessary to acknowledge that you probably aren't told how to work out for the first time in probably your whole adult life. I mean, as an athlete, I initially thought that because sports had consumed my life for so long, the exercise side of life after sport or retirement didn't seem like an issue. Of course, I know how to exercise, but once given the autonomy and freedom to work out on my own accord, it's not as simple as just showing up to practice and being told what to do. So, one way to embrace a new attitude towards movement is to experiment and diversify your exercises. As athletes, we're usually singularly focused on our sport, which doesn't leave a lot of room for other forms of exercise, but now you're able to do that. And this can be done by fitness classes at your local gym, joining a friend for a hike, or even just home YouTube videos. And for some athletes, this can also mean transitioning to compete in a different sport. And if you choose that path, remember that you will be a novice in a new sport, so adjust your mindset accordingly. And most importantly, the reason I emphasize movement is the numerous benefits. While we may not be aware as athletes, movement helps with stress and energy levels, a general sense of well-being and empowerment, and helps with sleep. So the reasons for movement are now going to be different than they were when you were competing. So now movement is about finding a sustainable and enjoyable routine while also prioritize moving to feel good. And moving to feel good doesn't mean you can't push or challenge yourself, but the focus now is just listening to your body, which can sometimes be dripping sweat on an elliptical, but it can also mean going outside for a walk and soaking up some rays for the sun. It can be much more flexible than what it used to be. And when I first retired, I tried a ton of different ways to move that I didn't have the opportunity to do beforehand. Like I said, gyms will often offer group fitness classes, but specialty studios will usually offer a first free class. And so I recently moved to the Denver area, and a friend and I had basically just rotated through the fitness studios in the area, taking advantage of their discounted week of classes or their free first week of classes. And this was everything. We tried a HIIT class in a hot yoga studio room, which was so hard, but it was also really fun and something I would have never done while I was competing. And so, like I said, it can be HIIT, it can be boxing, it can be bar, Pilates, dance. Movement and exercise is now more than just the sport that you were in. One, there's supposed to be a photo right here. But one way that I learn best is by reading. So while I have already mentioned one of these books, the other two books, while they did help me tremendously in reevaluating my mindset and thought processes while competing, they're all very relevant in the life after sport process as well. More Than a Body by Lindsay and Lexi Kite redefines positive body image by challenging our constraints and self-objectification, and helps readers develop body image resilience in their personal growth journeys. Intuitive Eating by Evelyn Tribole and Elise Reich, as we have spoken on, introduces 10 principles in shifting your mindset on eating and how influential our beliefs are in how we approach nutrition. The Practice of Groundedness by Brad Stolberg explores the importance of maintaining perspective in times of uncertainty and change. And then this little empty box here is supposed to be the Find Food Freedom podcast, which is great if you like diversifying your media. The Find Food Freedom podcast was created to help individuals take simple steps towards food freedom and emphasize body respect, emphasizing that diet culture has taught us to distrust our bodies and focuses on dismantling those thought patterns. So you are more than an athlete. So challenge yourself in how you judge your body, and to focus on your appearance is to undermine your self-worth. You cannot make peace with food when you're at war with your body. As a simple reminder to honor your hunger and satiety cues, be kind to your body, and realize that food is more than fuel. Reflect on who you are outside your sport. Start dreaming and setting goals for the next phase of your life, and identify what success and hard work mean for you. And also realize this might take time to figure out. This isn't going to be figured out over one day. Finally, movement is now for overall health and well-being. It's about trying new ways to move that you haven't had the opportunity to do beforehand. It's about listening to your body, and it's also figuring out what you like to do and what works for you. I hope that each of you can take away something from this talk. It's a hard transition, and figuring out who you are outside of being an athlete can be difficult, especially when sports had dominated your life for so long. But also give yourself some grace during this time. You're more than an athlete. Your value is more than your athletic performances, and life beyond sport is exciting, even if it doesn't seem like that right now. We will be sending out this presentation, but if you want anything else in terms of the research that I used, I'm happy to share it, and I will be sending out a handout just sort of summarizing some of our concepts that we talked about today. But thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate it. Does anyone have any questions? They can also put it into the chat as well.
Drop any questions in the chat. One question did come through, and Alexa, I'll let you answer it first, and then I'll give my take on it. Do you know if there are any colleges adopting or encouraging intuitive eating for their athletes?
I actually don't know the answer to that. Eden is the intuitive eating expert here, so maybe you could answer that one.
So what I see from a lot of sports dietitians is that there's a misunderstanding of what intuitive eating actually is, because they think that it's just listen to your body, when you eat when you're hungry, stop when you're full. And like I highlighted earlier, there's 4 different voices that we talk about in intuitive eating. And I work with a lot of athletes to help them adopt intuitive eating, and some dietitians call it intuitive fueling. But the practical hunger voice is one that when I see sports dietitians saying that intuitive eating doesn't work for athletes, I'm like, you didn't read the book. Because if you had, you would know that there are times that we have to eat out of practicality, especially as an endurance athlete, as a biker, as a skier, as a runner. And honoring that practical hunger, even though you don't feel hungry, is a way to honor your hunger as well. So I hope that by more dietitians like me kind of bringing awareness to that, some of the myths about intuitive eating, especially what we see on social media, there will be more of an understanding by sports dietitians to adopt this framework. I know that Stanford has, it's called the FASTER program, and I know that they definitely have a lot of resources around preventing eating disorders and disordered eating. My program did not necessarily have any helpful resources for eating disorders at the time, but that was 2008, 2012, so maybe they've changed. Okay, hope that answers that question. Molly asked, do higher energy expenditure sports, a new term for me, tend to produce athletes that are more prone to DE, so disordered eating? So do you have an example of which sports you're talking about, Molly? And I can kind of speak to that, and Alexa can give her point of view too. Running. Yes, running is definitely one that produces more disordered eating tendencies. I would say more weight-centric sports, gymnastics, figure skating, swimming, diving, cross country, running in any capacity. But one thing I would very much like to emphasize is that eating disorders and disordered eating do not discriminate. Anyone in any body shape, body size can have an eating disorder. And I guess something that caught me up as an athlete, it was like, because I was a softball player, I was like, well, this is only more, this happens to runners. This happens to cross-country runners. I'm not an athlete. So like whatever the sports dietitian is saying doesn't apply to me. And it didn't really I didn't wake up from that mindset until I broke 3 bones in my foot my senior year from running. So I would say there is definitely a prevalence in different sports, but eating disorders do not discriminate.
Mm-hmm. And I would also say there are particular sports, a lot of the high energy expenditure sports, that might also be more prone to disordered eating because of the objectification of sports. Like for runners, for so long, unfortunately, lean equaled fast. And so because people thought that being leaner meant that you were going to be faster, so that sort of led to that. I mean, we're also in sports bras and buns, and so you're going to, your body is in a way on display, and that can also lead to disordered eating.
There's also a statistic that I got from the National Eating Disorder Association, and I actually read it in Good for a Girl by Lauren Fleshman, and it was about the percentage of athletes, period, like college athletes who are prone to anorexia and bulimia. And the statistics are staggering. And off the top of my head, it's close to 30% of female athletes will present with anorexic tendencies, and over 50% of female college athletes will present with bulimic tendencies. So that doesn't matter what sport you're in. That was literally collecting all athletes. Okay. Dylan says, have you ever had any moments / breakthroughs since doing this work where you realize that you truly are more than an athlete? Moments of success, grace, and acceptance. I'll let you go first, Alexa.
Okay. There was a couple months ago when I was walking back to my apartment from the gym, and I just had this fleeting thought of, I'm not an athlete anymore. But there wasn't any sadness to it. There wasn't any melancholy to it. But I also reflect on that now. Of course, I'm an athlete. We're all athletes. Our evolution of what an athlete is will change. But being okay with that and being like, yeah, I am more than an athlete. I'm not an athlete anymore. Just that fleeting thought really had me thinking of, okay, well, what does it mean to be an athlete? Usually it means that you're going to be really hardworking. You're going to be determined and self-motivated and self-directed. And those are all qualities that you can apply to any of your life goals. And so to think that my life goals are limited to my athletic endeavors is, I don't want to say it's sad because that is some people's lives, but there's just so much more to life beyond that and beyond these athletic endeavors that we do have, which are so great. And they actually do really develop who you are outside of your sport. But just realizing that being more than an athlete is actually a good thing because I want to be well-rounded. And being an athlete professionally can also be a very selfish endeavor. So to be more than an athlete is actually me being personally a better person.
okay, this is definitely be like an evolution for me, but when I was retiring, I was like recovering from an eating disorder and dealing with bone injuries. And I think like walking away from the sport completely, I had this moment of like, who am I without this? And the way I was able to come back to movement after my bones healed enough, I had to realize like there are certain kinds of movement I can't do anymore. And that's from a place of taking care of my body. Like if you have, I don't have cartilage in my knees, there's certain things that hurt. Running hurts me. I'm not a runner. Like it hurts my body. But I think finding things in my identity that I actually forgot when I was a college athlete, like really helped me come back to myself and have more mental breakthroughs and realize I was much tougher than I ever thought I was. So for example, like the main reason why I started playing softball as a kid is because I liked being outside. So that helped me discover new sports as an adult because I'm like, well, if I just want to be outside, I can go do that now in different ways. But also I'm very creative, I'm very artistic, I love to sing. And remembering those other parts of my identity helped me not feel like I was losing so much when I retired. And then I would say moments of success, grace, and acceptance, like learning new sports as an adult, like Alexa, like definitely, you have to adjust your mindset. You have to be humble. You have to recognize you're going to suck, and that's okay. But learning to ski as an adult and like I live in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, this beautiful place, and like getting over the fear of looking like a beginner and being a beginner, I think showed me that I had a lot more growth that was possible in my brain and my body. And I realized I was capable of much more than I knew. And I remember like when I was retiring, like kind of like, I'm not an athlete anymore. I'm just gonna like, I don't know how to exercise like a normal person, but I'll do that. And now I think I've like come more full circle to where I'm like, I'm a recreational athlete, but I still am a badass on skis and my bike. So um, also, I would say moments of success for me, like body image wise, is like when you get to this place of acceptance of change. I heard something from the Fine Food Freedom lead dietitian, Sam Previtt, a couple years ago about our bodies being allowed to change. And if you think about it, your body changes from the moment you die, the moment you're born until the moment you die. And when we stop changing, we die. And I think I realized that like my body is allowed to change just like I'm allowed to change and evolve as a human being. And in that way, it's not going to have the same amount of muscle mass as it did when I was training hard, but it still is capable of amazing things. And that helped me get to this place of acceptance with whatever phase I'm in with my body, because it's kind of cool to be accepting of those changes in a world where we're kind of taught that, nope, you got to look like you did when you were 20 your whole life. So yeah. And I would say with that mental like mindset shift, More Than a Body, the book that she recommended, really helped me because it also helped me recognize how many coaches and how many people had made comments about my body my entire life and how I just really didn't want that anymore. And I now, because I'm not competing, I have control over that a lot more too. Molly says, I understand how they do not discriminate about talking about eating disorders, but I also see so much of the disordered eating and eating disorder research on athletes being done on runners. Thought the higher energy expenditure nature of running might be correlated. I mean, it could be, but what I would tell you, Molly, is that I think there needs to be more research on Nordic skiers. There needs to be more research on some of these people doing mountain sports or like these ultra endurance events that are beyond just running, because I think that there's probably way more prevalence that we just don't see yet in the research. There is a project, I'll put it in the chat for you guys, but it's like Project Reds. And if you ever read the International Olympic Committee on like their take on relative energy deficiency in sport, they have more research in there across sports. I would actually say, I think that like Reds would probably be like really prevalent in like, again, like figure skaters, gymnasts, like runners, yes, but like it's definitely, it's present a lot more in recreational athletes too. They don't realize it. They don't recognize it. Like if you don't consider yourself an athlete, a lot of times you don't think that you deserve to fuel like an athlete. So you kind of fall prey to diet culture. So I think there's actually a lot more people who are suffering from Reds who don't realize it, like the weekend warriors or the people that just like, oh, I just run for fun, but they don't actually adopt sports nutrition principles, even if they're retired or just running for fun.
Yeah, and there might not be things, or you might not get to the point of anorexia nervosa, but you might still have eating disorder tendencies.
Yeah, and I would say, to piggyback off of that, I was never like diagnosed with any of the big three that I would say, like anorexia nervosa, you know, bulimia or binge eating disorder. To me, those are like the big three. But when I read the initial, like, I read a lot of research on female athlete triad because that's what it was called at the time in 2012. But when I read like the definition of disordered eating, I'm like, well, I have all of these tendencies and I've done all of these things, but they're actually to a more severe point than what they're describing in this paper. And that's actually called like other specified feeding eating disorder. Basically, you have enough clinical symptoms to have all three. And so that's what I had. Okay. Kylie asks, have you ever struggled with guilty feelings that you should be doing more in terms of movement? Does that come this redirecting your goals? I used to feel guilty with not moving as much, but I think because I've gotten into more like endurance sports, I can't go hard every day. And I think again, because I have some bone injuries, some days it's just painful. And I actually I heard another sports dietitian say this. Tori Cameron said this, and I think she got it from Uriel Carlson. They're both dietitians for endurance athletes, mountain endurance athletes, but we get weaker when we train and we get stronger when we recover. And I think that gave me permission to rest. And so now I would tell people actually rest like 3 to 4 days a week versus when I was a college athlete, I think I might have had one rest day a week. And I feel stronger than I do. I feel stronger now and like I have more resilience towards injuries than I did then when I wasn't resting. Alexa, what are your thoughts on that?
To piggyback off of that, yes, rest is just as productive mentally and physically as exercise is, but also realize that athletes have the tendency to be highly motivated and driven, to be really determined in what they're doing, whether this is your athletic goals or your life goals in general. And so you're going to probably be harder working than someone who's not a competitive athlete. You're probably going to be doing a lot more already. So realizing I do work hard, like even if I am not moving, and I do work and I do really push myself cognitively. And so I sort of need that rest to really be able to function at a high level. Like Eden talked about physically, even cognitively, you can't always be on and you can't be coming up with these aha moments or these great ideas when you're always going and going and going. So it's really important to have that rest physically and mentally.
Something I'd also say there, I put out this messaging a lot to people, is that like you deserve to eat whether you laid in bed all day, you're resting, you're injured, or you're moving your body. And I think a lot of people struggle with giving themselves permission to eat on rest days. But I've had some classes before where I will actually go through like the energy expenditure of somebody who is recovering from an ACL surgery. And numbers can be very triggering for people, but I also, the way I try to show people is like, if you eat more of these things, you will recover faster. But that still takes people actually implementing that and like believing me. But I think what was interesting, like if I was going off of myself, and just full warning, I'm going to talk about some numbers here. I'm tall, I'm like 5'11-ish, like 150-ish. And if I was recovering from ACL surgery and just going to PT, my calorie needs and my protein needs are still super high. Like I would need around 3,000 calories a day to heal from that injury adequately. And so that helps me, like knowing that number helps me be like, screw you, voice that tells me I can't eat. Like if I don't eat, then my body can't repair the tissues that it's trying to repair. So I always tell people like you deserve to eat, whether you're resting, you're recovering from an injury, or if it's just another day. We all deserve to eat every single day. That like the portions and everything, like it all adjusts according to our needs, but I would say like intuitive eating helped me get to this place of recognizing that I have permission to eat every single day, and eating food every single day is a basic need of every human being.
Mhm. And if you listen to your hunger cues and you eat when you are hungry, even on rest days or even on days that you aren't exercising, then those obsessive thoughts about being hungry will go away, and then you can just move on with your day and the things that you're doing. And it's not like, oh, I'm so hungry, but I didn't exercise today, so I can't eat. It's like, okay, I'm gonna go have a snack, and then I'm gonna return to what I'm doing, and I'm actually gonna be able to focus on it.
Totally agree. Okay, I have a question for you, Alexa.
Mhm.
Okay, whenever you graduate, what is your dream job after you graduate?
It's been evolving since I've been in school. I will say that I did have a dream of being a dietitian with a big, like, Power Five school, in the athletic department. Now I've moved a little bit more towards the private practice side of things, but I'm also realizing I'm getting more interested in the research side. And so if I could be with a sports nutrition company where I can still work with athletes and work on that private practice and one-on-one clientele, but I can also work with the evolving and sports nutrition side of things. I would love both of those sides of it. So, but I'm also going to be doing a handful of internships this year in the clinic, with the public health department, with sustainability company. So maybe I'll find I have a different vision for myself in a year's time. So, but right now my heart is in sports dietetics.
Yeah. My favorite rotation from my days in grad school, I worked briefly for a dietitian who worked for Atlanta Ballet Company. So preventing eating disorders while also trying to help them fuel accordingly and fit into vintage costumes. And it was a very sensitive population, but she was running a private practice and doing a lot of paid talks and writing articles. And now I realize I think that's why I liked it. There was a lot of flexibility there on top of working with like the target population that she really cared about. And what's cool, like when you get later in your career, not like that much later, I've been a dietitian since 2015, like those preceptors that you have now will just be like clapping you on. They'll be like, yay. Like I got a message from one of my professors last week who now is like the lead nutrition strategist for Chick-fil-A. And she was like, I'm so proud of you and what you're doing for our profession. I was like, me? Oh my God, thank you. So like, it'll be cool to see like which rotations you really vibe with and which preceptors kind of keep up with your career as you evolve.
For those who don't know, to be a registered dietitian, you have to have 1,000 rotation or internship hours. They're the same thing. And you can get those hours a handful of different ways. My program specifically will integrate my internships or rotations into the different sectors that dietitians can work in: sustainability, clinic, long-term care, business, community. So I'll have the opportunity to, because registered dietitians, it's more than just being in a hospital, it's more than just sports dietitians. There's a huge realm, so that will be exciting.
Yeah. Well, this was great. Thank you so much, Alexa. Thank you to everybody who attended. We will get the replay sent out as soon as possible. And we do have a handout with some of the themes from tonight in addition to resources for you. And if you ever need anything, you can find me on Instagram at gardenofeden_RD. And I'm pretty sure Alexa's handle is just her name. It's Alexa Efraimson. And yeah, our emails are right there. I hope you all have a lovely evening.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.